you let Lloyd in, or is he? Okay. Let me know, Keena, you.
Remy, do you see Counselor Snook?
Keena, you let me know when you're ready. He may join us later. Lloyd?
I'm here.
All right. All right. So we're going to establish virtual panelist connection. Lloyd Snook, he indicated earlier that he is here in Charlottesville. He's at home, but can't join us due to health mending, but he'll be with us in person again soon. So, Counselor, can you read us back into out of closed session, please?
Sure. I move that this council certify by a recorded vote that to the best of each council member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from the open meeting requirements of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act and identified in the motion convening the closed session were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed session.
Is there a second?
Second?
Okay, can we vote on it, please? Oh,
Aye from me.
okay, thank you. Is there a motion to appoint members to boards and commission? You can read it.
I just have the names of who's being appointed. I don't have all the fun language.
I think you just,
Yeah.
Just make it up? Okay, I
Yeah.
move to appoint the following people
There
to the
you go.
following boards.
Yes, yes.
Charlottesville Affordable Housing Fund Committee, we'd like to appoint Thomas King. For the Community Development Block Grant Task Force, Thomas King and Greg Self. For the Charlottesville Albemarle Airport Commission, Ben Chambers. For the Charlottesville Albemarle Convention and Visitors Bureau Board, Daniel Shea. For the Jefferson Area Criminal Justice Board, Scott Wheeler. For the Minority Business Commission, Jamala Hamilton and Marlena Reed. For the Retirement Commission, Kai Pacheco. For the Ravenna River Basin Commission, Jason Halbert. And for the Social Services Advisory Board, Benjamin Dick and Amwira Nakire.
What was the second one you said? Did you said airport?
The block grant and then the airport.
Is that what, the airport? Let's see.
just
No,
do bidding this time.
Right.
And we're still waiting on the joint rep. for
Right,
later.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Is there a second?
Second?
Okay, can we vote, please? Lloyd?
it's aye for me.
Okay. All right.
And we want to thank all those folks for applying and note that there are some boards and commissions that still have availability, so please visit the city website to check those out.
Lots of opportunity to serve the community in different ways. So, the next item for the agenda is a moment of silence. Okay, thank you very much. Are there any announcements that anyone wanted to make?
I do.
Yeah.
I've got two. The first is I had the pleasure to be in the audience for the Charlottesville High School 50th year anniversary concert this past Saturday, and I just want to recognize the tremendous job that everyone who showed up to play and direct did that day, from the band, the orchestra, and the choir teams. But also I want to just commend the fact that over the past 5 decades, we've created a really strong fine arts program at our city schools, and it was really exciting to be a part of that when I was in city schools, and to go back and see such a strong turnout. There were over like 250 people who came to perform that day, alums and current students, and it was really cool. So
So it was a concert was like Saturday?
this
evening?
past Saturday, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was excellent. And then my announcement for future things, the Neighborhood Walk Series, the next one is coming up on December 8th at 2 p.m. In the Lewis Mountain neighborhood. So the group is going to meet at the Foods of All Nations on Ivy Road. It's an easy walk through a neighborhood. You get to chat with new friends who live in and around the area. You don't have to live in that neighborhood to join. It's just a way to get out and get some steps and explore a new part of town, or explore your own part of town with new people. So again, that's December 8th at 2 p.m. It's led by our city bike ped coordinator. So it happens monthly on the second Sunday. So we'll continue that into the new year.
Excuse me, I wanted to mention that I was able to go to the firefighters graduation on Friday night at the MLK Center at CHS. There were 14 graduates, I believe.
I think so.
Yeah, and it was very impressive, very well done, and I was grateful to see that force was continuing to grow. And the other thing I wanted to point out is that Magic on the Mall is happening this Thursday. On the mall at 8 p.m. So I hope people can try to make it. There's going to be a lot of fun things coming up as we get into the Advent, Christmas season, holiday season.
Yeah, and that is just not going to, that's going to be the kickoff. It's going to be all season long, just magical lights on the mall. It's amazing what's going to be happening down there with all of the pictures and places you can come to, talk about your great city of Charlottesville. Speaking of which, I just left a conference in Tampa where there were city managers and mayors and things from all over the country, and just got a lot of good ideas. And I met with Sam before the meeting today to disseminate all of the different ideas that I'm sure Taylor will probably be getting some as well, some of the ideas. So anyway, it's a lot of good things going on around the country, and I was able to get some ideas from that. So great. Let's see. There are no recognitions this month, do we, Keena? We don't have right proclamations yet. So we're now at the first opportunity for community matters. We have 5 people who've pre-registered to speak, and so we have opportunity for Marty, you can start coming on now. You're number 1, and so we have opportunities for 11 people that to speak, and after the first 5, I will identify people in the audience that like to speak. So the first one is Marty Keene with Java. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. It's nice to be here tonight. I wanted to give you just an update on one particular client from Charlottesville, and give you an idea and give your citizens an idea of the kinds of things. So our registered dietitian meets with every new home-delivered meal client, and when she did, she found out that this particular resident of Charlottesville had a goal to eat healthier by increasing her intake of fruits and vegetables. And so, but her concern was she couldn't afford the fresh produce on the limited income and the SNAP benefits. And we've been able to be a part of the Virginia Farm Market Fresh program. And so our aging service coordinator worked with her to get her food vouchers to use at the local farmers market. And now she is so excited to have more access to fresh and healthy food. So I think that's an important program, and it's one that just became available last spring, and so we hope to continue to do that. We also had someone who was in our JREC, our adult care, and the family felt they needed to go to a memory care. And after 3 weeks, they made sure that the person came back home again. And when we said, you know, what could we do to help you? They said, really just having the constant care of things like showers was really difficult. So the second day the person was back, we gave them a shower. And the daughter was so happy to be able to keep her loved one at home. And again, this is a Charlottesville resident. Her quote was, "You have no idea what this means to me. I felt so guilty placing my mom at a center, but I just couldn't do it all the care myself. This is a huge weight taken off my shoulders, and I cannot thank the staff enough." So just to keep in mind the kinds of things that JABA is able to do, from those people still at home wanting to eat healthy to those people that we are keeping in the community and not having to go to an institution quite so quickly. And I just want to use my remaining time to thank all of you so much for your support of JABA and your support of me over the last 12 years. I have loved being at JABA, and I've enjoyed coming before you pretty much every quarter. And in January, we will have a new CEO start, and I'll be, I'm sure, bringing that person to introduce her to all of you, and then hopefully setting up meetings individually. But I wanted to publicly say what a pleasure it's been for working with the City of Charlottesville and the support that you give seniors in your community that really helps us all work on this mission together. Thank you.
Thank you, Marta. And Marta, thank you. I'm the council's rep on your board, and it was hard to replace you. We were looking for that person that could walk on water. This person we hired, I think, can almost do it, but not like you. Thank you so much.
Thank
Hope
you.
you enjoy your retirement.
I'm looking forward to getting to see all the kinds of things you all talk about all the time.
You come on down to the mall, so. Thank you.
Marta.
The next speaker is William Thompson. Is William Thompson here? Okay, so we have room for another speaker, actually. M. Gunter? M. Gunter? Nathan Wilson?
All right, you can hear me okay?
Yes.
It's a sellout crowd. I
Yeah.
want to make sure. All right, well, my name is Nathan Wilson. I live in Belmont. I spend a ton of time on the mall, and I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk about the mall a little bit tonight. The mall is a lot of things to Charlottesville, certainly the cultural epicenter of the city and one of the biggest draws to the city. I visit several times a week to eat, run, and most notably to play music. Speaking as a lifelong musician, playing on the street is a unique opportunity to connect with the community and meet like-minded people. If you read Google reviews of the mall, the majority mention the vibrancy of street performers. Personally, I've met some wonderful people, connected with fellow performers, and hopefully inspired some young people to pursue music and arts themselves. Playing an unusual instrument like the didgeridoo, every session includes at least one cultural lesson about Australia, where my mom grew up. The beauty of the mall is that there's something for everyone. It's inclusive. One can experience brass bands and polka to singer-songwriters on acoustic guitar and everything in between. And on the best days, a walk down the mall is like a visit to a different part of the world on every block with the rich diversity of the performers. These days, however, on the weekends, the experience has turned into an arms race of who has the loudest amp. I've noticed a few performers who play almost every night out of the week on very loud speakers to a very loud backing track, which betrays the spirit of the mall. On a recent walk, I heard a solitary performer with speakers so loud you could hear them for 5 blocks, which is almost the entirety of the mall, as you know. Fellow performers are frustrated, frequent visitors are frustrated, I'm frustrated, local businesses are frustrated. I've heard diners at the outdoor dining areas complain to their servers about how loud the music is, and they have no recourse about the blaring sound. I've even noticed a few restaurants and businesses that have started cranking their own outdoor speakers way up when that same lady on the cello sets up for the 5th night in a row. I would speculate that it's an effort to deter them from blasting the same recorded songs over and over. The final straw that inspired me to speak today was last Saturday, 2 days ago. I played for fewer than 5 minutes before a performer set up at the music box block I think about 4 blocks down from here, with an amp that completely drowned me out from more than 2 blocks away. What frustrated me the most was this person wasn't even playing. He was a scam artist, fake playing the violin, and displacing at least 3 of us who were out there first playing acoustically. Those scams, if you know anything about those, you can look online. They're actually fairly sophisticated and ubiquitous. To be clear, I know that musical tastes are different for everyone. I'm not trying to single out other performers for what they play, as long as they're actually playing it, of course. If that cello lady wants to play all day, every day, she has that right. However, she shouldn't have the right to monopolize the space with her volume. Among those of us who play out there regularly, it's a matter of fairness. We want more opportunities and more music, not less.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Kate Fraley?
Hello, City Manager, Mayor, Councilors. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. My name is Kate Fraley, and I live on Yorktown Drive. I've sent you all an email regarding my concern about how money won't be flowing from the federal government or the state in the future for programs for low-wealth individuals and families in our community. It's going to be really hard to cover the cost of those, and the city needs to address your budget to cut some things that aren't high priorities on the long-range plan so that you can cover these programs. Tonight, the Department of Social Services, I think some people are here, Advisory Board will deliver its annual report to the city. On page 40 of your packet, the report includes costs of programs, including a very large nutritional program, primarily federally funded. It is the SNAP program, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, and in a year, it's about $13,600,000. Any cut in SNAP or other programs that support low-wealth individuals in our community will hurt us all. Mr. Sanders, I want to thank you for answering my email and providing reassurance that you will make sure Charlottesville will be a place where everyone thrives. Maybe we'll be able to stop some of the Project 2025 budget cuts, but I wouldn't count on it. Today, at the earlier meeting, Mr. Sanders said he hoped that taxes in Charlottesville wouldn't have to be raised. I don't know if that will be possible unless you cut other programs. We have to prepare for reality. All of us do. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. Fraley. So that was all of the pre-registered speakers. We now have the opportunity for 13 other speakers. Greer?
Good evening. My name is Greer Achenbach. I represent the Friends of Charlottesville Downtown organization. I am just here to express our concerns over the proposed BAR revisions to the cafe spaces. Not that we are against them, we just find them to be a little bit overly restrictive. We heard a very eloquent speaker about the mall a few minutes ago, and one of the things we most value about the mall is its diversity. It's an arts, culture, and entertainment district, and there's some things in these proposed revisions that would potentially limit some of our beautification efforts downtown. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you all again for your support of Magic on the Mall. We hope that everyone comes downtown to shop, dine, and enjoy the season with us.
Thank you. Sir?
I feel kind of like a jerk standing up here after following JAVA. They're the most incredible organization. Their Medicare program is amazing.
Yes, sir.
Last year, they saved people over $1.5 million in prescription drug plans. And
Yeah.
they're just amazing. However, my name's Downing Smith. I live at 810 Locust Avenue. And compared to a lot of things you work about, this is not important, but sometimes things get under my skin. And I read in Sean Tubbs' article that y'all are looking at an RFP to allow deer hunting in the parks to renew what you've been doing for the last couple of years. And what really disturbed me is there's a possibility they may use guns. And I pulled some stuff off the internet. And high-powered rifle bullets can go a long way and kill people. 9mm handguns, which are kind of the gun of choice in the city of Charlottesville, I'm afraid, have a range of about 15 to 50 yards. A 40-pound bow, which I believe is about the biggest bow you can get and is what's been used in the past, has an effective range of 50 to 60 yards, maximum range of 280 to 350 yards. A 12-gauge double-aught buck shotgun has an effective range of about 100 yards, 12-gauge with a slug 200 yards. The range with a high-powered rifle, depending on the ammunition and the weapon, has a possible range of 1,600 yards, and that's closing in on a mile. So if you go ahead with this thing, please don't let them use guns. I don't think a professional hunter is going to kill anybody, but there's still a possibility, and if the possibility is greater than 0, it's too high for me. But seeing how I have a little bit of time left, I don't think you really need the program. I don't know how many deer get killed on an annual basis. I'm not a bleeding heart. I believe in deer hunting. I've killed a deer. It was delicious. But the reasons, numerous complaints. How many? Sustained complaints. What does this mean? Lyme disease. Killing a few deer in the park isn't really going to reduce the amount of Lyme disease. Use bug spray. I do. There are other types of ticks, and there are also mosquitoes that can give you disease. Reducing the deer population, that's not really a job for the city of Charlottesville. That's the job for the Department of, what do they call it now, managing wildlife resources or whatever. And finally, traffic accidents. I don't know how many traffic accidents are caused by deer. I don't have a number. Maybe y'all have that in your little notebooks up there. But the deer are going to come in from Albemarle County anyhow. And how much does this program cost? I didn't get that information either. So I'm out of time. Two things. One, Mr. Pinkston, you were quoted, I think, on saying that you'd like to see all the speed limits in Charlottesville reduced to 25 miles an hour. The problem isn't the speed limits, it's the enforcement. And
Thank you.
It's not our police department. We have a great police department.
Thank you,
They just
sir.
don't have enough resources to do everything they need to do.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Appreciate it. Who else would like to speak? We have opportunity for another 11 speakers. Oh.
Hello, my name is Mo Vandesampel, 608 Cabell Avenue. I sent all of you an email before this thinking I wouldn't be able to make it, but I was able to rush over in time after class ended, so I was able to make it. Very happy, because I really wanted to speak about these cafe requirements. I find them completely ludicrous and actually almost bordering on offensive. The idea that the city government can do a better job than the businesses of Charlottesville of deciding what Charlottesville citizens like to see and think is beautiful is completely ludicrous. I was looking through the particular table that was laid out, and I found almost every single thing on there objectionable. But to isolate just one thing in particular, it seems that the BAR has just a deep antipathy towards color, and I really find this quite horrifying, almost on a philosophical level. There's something deeply conservative about banning color from public spaces and instead mandating that everything be black and silver. I hope you kind of see the aesthetic vibe that gives off. It's very dystopian. And again, yeah, I really don't even think that the city should have much of a say in this, other than very base level, you're not allowed to create massive sound externalities. You shouldn't be able to have blaring lights. The idea that the government should be able to say what color of parasol the Nook has outside is completely ludicrous. And I as an economist that to some degree thinks that the free market will make good outcomes, I think it's just completely beyond the pale. I frankly think that you should not renew these things in the first place, much less make them more restrictive, as you are being asked to do today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Who else would like to speak? Yes, sure.
Hi, I'm Sherry Stewart. I'm here for another reason, but I just wanted to mention that I'm also a commissioner on the Sister Cities Commission of Charlottesville. And this past Saturday, we held our Virginia meeting here in Charlottesville at the beautiful diversity equity space that UVA has on West Main Street. And we had a large group from Richmond, and Fred Blanton, who lives in Stanton, is the coordinator for the entire state of Virginia. And we had a representative from the Sister Cities Commission International who came in from Washington, D.C. for the evening. So I made sure to give lots of recommendations for places to eat and visit. But I just wanted to say that as a new commissioner, I was very excited. We also had some virtual guests from around the state and to learn just what's happening around the state. And it made me hopeful and that we can do more exciting things and teach our community about our sister cities and maybe even adopt another sister city. There's a lot of history, and we just celebrated, I think it was it 30 years?
20 years with
20
Besançon.
years with Besançon, our sister city in France, so that was very exciting. So, thank you.
Thank you so much, Mary. Who else would like to speak? There'll be opportunity at the end of the meeting. Okay, thank you. We'll now go to the consent agenda item.
Consent agenda. Number 2, minutes, November 4th regular meeting. Number 3, an ordinance, the Virginia Department of Social Services temporary aid to needy families grants, $69,312.67, second reading. 4, resolution to appropriate Virginia Department of Criminal Justice Services Victims of Crime Act Grant Award, FY24, $123,000, second reading. 5, a resolution to appropriate $20,000 for the Virginia Department of Education Special Nutrition Program Child and Adult Care Food Program, second reading. 6, resolution authorizing Charlottesville Redevelopment and Housing Authority to create a corporation and/or limited liability corporation, LLC, second reading.
I think there was a request to remove that. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I guess I'll finish reading and then you
Okay.
all can
Okay.
discuss it.
Thanks, Kim.
Number 7, resolution to appropriate funds from the Supreme Court of Virginia Recovery Court Docket Grant in the amount of $240,000 for the Charlottesville-Albemarle Recovery Court, one of 2 readings. 8, a resolution to appropriate $408,437 from the Opioid Abatement Authority Collaborative Partnership Grant, one of 2 readings. And number 9 was pulled at the request of staff.
Okay. So I think that after talking with counselors and the executive the director of the Housing Authority, Mr. Sales, we also want to pull number 6, and so that I think they can talk with Emily and others just to flesh that out.
That would be a deferral to another meeting.
Yes, yes. Lloyd, did you okay with that? Did you?
I'm okay with that. I did have one question.
Yeah.
And that deals with the $123,000 for the Victims of Crime Grant Award. The memo says that this is a new award, that we've received similar awards since 2019. And I guess my question was, in the next paragraph, it talks about funds will be used to hire one school-based interventionist and so on. Do I understand that that person is not presently hired, or is that where we've hired using similar awards since 2019? I'm just curious as to which one that is. Are we hiring somebody new or not? I apologize. I should have asked the question before the meeting, so we don't have to take up time right now. Do we know?
Yeah, that doesn't come, I'm not sure. I know that I've participated in an audit of the program to make sure that we are meeting our compliance responsibilities, but I do not know if this is a new position or existing. We can find that out for you, though.
Well, it's in any event being funded through the schools, but I assume unless Department of Human Services is hiring the person to be in the schools. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, so I think they're gonna have to get back to you on that, Lloyd. Did you want
Well,
it pulled or?
No, I'm fine with it either way. I think the memo is a little confusing in that respect, and I was just hoping to get some clarity. Either way, it's good program, good use for the money, no problem with it.
Okay, so Sam, if you can get those two.
I can get the clarity for you and
Yeah.
send that out.
And so
Thanks.
we're going to defer number 6 and number, which?
9.
Number 9. Is,
Do you need a motion to amend the consent agenda, or is that enough?
Well, I guess I would move approval of the consent agenda deferring items 6 and 9.
Second.
Fantastic.
okay, can we vote?
And put me down as a yes.
Okay. Thank you. Motion passes 5-0. The next item on the agenda is the city manager's report. Mrs. Sanders, it's a report from the Social Services Advisory Board Annual Report to City Council.
Yeah, so I have no comments of my own because I'm going to let our social services team take it. But to give you the answer, because we were working on getting you the answer as you were asking that, it is an existing position. So that's not a new position that's funded. It's an existing position. Those are funds to support that work.
This is for Lloyd's.
For Lloyd's question,
Okay.
yes. Cherry, are you presenting? All right, so we're going to receive a report from the Social Services Advisory Board.
Hello again.
Hello.
And thank you to Mr. Sanders and Mayor Wade and Vice Mayor Pinkston and the rest of the city council. Thanks for having us. I hope that all of you were able to take a look at our summary of our yearly report that Ms. Laura Morris and her lovely team helped put together, since we're still waiting for our new director.
Coming soon.
Coming soon, yay. So you can feel free to ask any questions about the report, but I just want to focus on a couple of areas that we would like to highlight this year. And the first one is that we have seen the Child Protective Services Division has seen a 33% increase in foster care cases this year. And there are currently 78 children in foster care. And some of the reasons for that are increased substance abuse issues and concerns, housing issues, and mental health issues. And usually it's a combination of at least two of those, but not always. Another challenge, if you didn't already know, is that the child care subsidy program the state has limited the number of children that they're subsidizing to go into centers. In the past, we could ask for more money and have a waiting list, and we are not able to have we're not able to ask for more money now. So as of July 1st, because of funding availability, we have wait lists, and Charlottesville currently, and we also had, MACA closed, and there some other places have closed. So we need more childcare subsidies in Charlottesville to help parents put their children in childcare while they work. And there aren't openings right now. And we're partnering with the City Schools preschool program and the United Way to help income-eligible families request and apply for things. But we need help. There are 13 children on the wait list for Charlottesville currently. The other thing I wanted to point out is that starting the beginning of this month, November 1st, 2024, the SNAP program reinstated program interviews for initial applications and renewals. There was a waiver during COVID, and so there were extensions and people didn't have to reapply. So now the Department of Social Services will have increased administrative work for the benefit specialists because of scheduling interviews and conducting them. and they have to do re-education of clients to remind them to keep their interview appointments and to maintain their SNAP benefits. They have to keep everything up to date. So if you know anyone who fits into that and needs to reapply, please make sure that you have your address updated with the Department of Social Services so that we're able to get in touch with you. And I think those are the main things that we wanted to point out, but if you have any questions or comments?
Yeah, Michael, I'll start with you.
No questions. I think one of the things that stood out was just the new position request, as well as 10% of the workforce eligible to retire in 2025, including a majority of the benefit program supervisors. And I'm sure we're all aware of that, but just kind of how we prepare and manage that without creating disruptions, I think was probably the biggest thing that stood out to me, as well as just how worse the situation already is getting in terms of ability to access benefits, but from a federal perspective.
Right.
Just a quick point to clarify, I think I heard wrong. When you said that the state is now limiting the number of children who can be subsidized in child care centers?
Well, so I may not have explained that well. So they allocate funding to each locality based on the population size and the previous level of enrollments. But in the past, if we had people on a waiting list, we were able to ask for more funding, and we're not able to do that any longer.
So the 13 kids that are on the wait list, it's no longer really a wait list?
Excuse me, it's still a wait list. So those are 13 children in the community right now waiting to receive child subsidy funding, or if they are going to be placed in a child care center.
Okay, so we still have a wait list, we just can't apply for more funding?
Correct.
From the state.
Correct.
Got it, okay, thank you for that
Thanks.
clarification.
Thanks for asking.
Yeah, I'm on the Social Services Advisory Board with Sherry, and thank you for your leadership, Sherry, with that, and Laura and the rest of the group. I really appreciate it. I've enjoyed those times. They're Mondays at noon, and I've just learned a lot from the various folks around the table in terms of all the good work that's going on here. So thank you for coming. I'm glad we were able to get you in at the earlier part of the meeting as opposed to towards the end last time.
Yeah, because Mr. Sanders said he was going to owe me
Take care.
something. That's what you said last year, Mr. Sanders. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, Lloyd, do you have any?
I got nothing. Sounds good to me. Thank you.
And
Yeah.
excuse us, we have somewhere else to be, but thank you all very much.
Thank you so much. We appreciate y'all.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda, oh, did you have any other,
No, that's it.
Okay.
That is the report.
okay, is, the action items is, the ordinance amending the city code for the, Police Civilian Oversight Board. Eden, you doing this? This is we deferred it from last month.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, Ms. Thomas, Mr. Sanders. I think tonight we are here for the second reading of the proposed changes from the city staff written by our city attorney's office for the PCOB, again, specifically relating to kind of an opportunity for the council to consider different recruitment options. I'll report to you, the PCOB is still working on this. They are really looking at this as an opportunity, and I don't want to speak for them, but just my observation is that this is an opportunity for them to kind of go through that entire ordinance to figure out what other changes might be necessary that they want to bring to the council for your consideration. They are taking the time to do that. They're concerned about a piecemeal approach, which I completely understand from their perspective. So at this point, not to put any sort of pressure on the council, I think you are facing kind of a fork in the road. You can allow the PCOB to kind of do their work and bring a holistic set of recommendations relating to a number of things and pause the current initiative in front of you, or you can enact the current changes, which address specifically kind of eligibility to serve on the board. Sometimes matters are difficult when it doesn't seem like there's one clear way to go. It's a little bit trivial. You can't necessarily make a bad decision, but that's kind of where we are, and I'm happy to answer any questions about that.
Michael, what is your view on this?
Well, I mean, likewise, I think it's just up for council to decide. I emailed earlier today at their Thursday meeting. I think they voted on a few changes that were for us. Looking at them now, their recommendation was retaining current requirements for demographic diversity, retaining requirements for residency in Charlottesville except for the social justice representatives and law enforcement officer representatives, and then to have a larger role in our application process and interview process for deciding them. So I guess to distill it, I think our choice is what's in front of us now is we give first preference to anyone who's a Charlottesville resident. We retain the requirements for members of disadvantaged communities as well as social justice org reps. But if we receive no qualifying applicants that are city residents, Albemarle residents could be considered, whereas theirs does that for all the positions except the members of a disadvantaged community.
So if we make this change tonight, they can always come back with other pieces that they want to modify the ordinance.
My understanding is correct. I mean, we could entertain changes at any point as well, so it can be an iterative process.
Let me also offer, part of my participation in the conversation was that when this came up in October, that the PCOB was requesting that you all not move without them having a chance to consider. I reached out to the board informing them of my desire for us to work towards a review of the ordinance, one that they as a board would be able to execute and one that I would perform separately. And that would be the staff recommendation. So that would be myself, Deputy Marshal, working with our executive director and identifying whatever are the things that we too identify are issues that need to be addressed, and where they can come together, we could bring that to you together as a joint recommendation, and where there was any departure, we would show those two different opinions and allow you the ability to have all the information in front of you to make a decision on whether you wanted to act or not and choose how to go about doing that. They have appointed a committee, and that committee is going to work towards figuring out what are all the things. I am going to continue to move forward in conducting what I consider to be my responsibility, since the prior council that established the PCOB used the term city manager throughout that document as the person who's supposed to make sure it all works. So regardless of what action you take today, you can change it later. And ideally, that's the question on the table is, are you of the same mindset that you were to bring forward these changes to be able to fill the seats? Or would you be open to the idea of waiting, and maybe we can have this as a part of that first batch of changes as Eden has indicated here, but I don't know the timing of that, unfortunately.
Yeah, my view is we should go ahead and approve what's here, because what we've been struggling with for 6 months, I mean, for a long time, is to actually have enough people on the board to do the work. And the rules are strict enough in terms of criteria to make that a challenge. I just feel like with this board, I've been on, well, I don't want to be negative, so I'm going to stop, but I feel like there have been lots and lots of conversations about continuing to tweak and modify and change, and I know all of that's good, but let's at least make sure we can staff the board with the people that it needs, and if there's some sort of hindrance because we've made it too strict in terms of the requirements, then let's loosen that so that we can get the people there to actually do this work.
I have a question. If this was formally decided, what Michael sent us a handy recap about what happened at their meeting last Thursday evening. They passed a formal recommendation for what they would like to see. How come that didn't make it to us in a formal way?
I can't speak for them, and I don't know what they were thinking in terms of process. I attended that meeting virtually, And they voted on that, and they said they would send it to the city attorney. So I don't know if they were waiting on. I did receive it because they emailed it to me as well, because I was at that meeting, and I sent that information along to you all as well.
Thank you for doing that, by the way.
But I'm not sure what their process goal was.
Yeah, I mean, without, again, being, well, I don't know. Ultimately, we're the ones who need to decide what this board needs to do. And they have lots of excellent ideas, and I hope we can continue to iterate on those. But it's important for this board to make some real progress in terms of getting done the things that they're set up to do. So to me, if we can at least get past this hurdle of them having sufficient board members, that should help.
Yeah, it's my understanding that city residents will get first preference.
Correct, what's in our packet
Yeah.
tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
the
so-
7 voting members of the board shall be residents of or shall be employed in the city of Charlottesville or Albemarle County, with priority given to city residents and those with
Yeah.
significant and demonstrable ties to the city. I mean, it's very straightforward.
Yeah.
And it doesn't preclude them from continuing to work with
it does
your
not.
office.
That's right, it does not.
Okay.
And that could be,
Wonderful.
that could be a recommendation to revisit this as well. I mean,
Yeah,
I would say
'cause-
that probably would be
Because
included.
we've already deferred this twice and given them a deadline of this is the
Yeah.
day we wanted to make a decision, and if they decided Thursday and we didn't hear about it,
That's, yeah.
Okay, so.
Does
any
Lloyd
oth-
have any? I wonder.
Yeah. Lloyd?
Well, yeah, I mean, my concern is that what we're not able to do right now is to appoint people of either minority members or people who are public housing residents or people who come from communities typically over policed or whatever the language has been. And so when people complain that what we're proposing to do is somehow going to result in a sort of dispossessing or displacing people who are, public housing residents and minority members, we're trying to get to the point where we can replace those people. Right now, we've got 2 vacant community representative positions, and we've got basically of the people who are full-time appointments, regular appointments, whereas we're supposed to have 3 in that minority category, we only have 1, and we've just not gotten the applicants in necessary qualified people to do it. And so I think we need to do it in large part so that we can get the board populated enough so that it can move on and do some of what it is supposed to be doing. One of the other concerns, and I will say this publicly as I've said it a couple times before, one of my concerns about the PCOB has been that we on council and the PCOB have spent the last 4 years, 5 years really, dickering over the terms of how they are going to be set up, and what I liken to arguing over the shape of the table, to go back to the 1970s when we were trying to get a peace treaty in Vietnam, and everybody spent 3 years arguing about the shape of the table. So far, the PCOB hasn't reviewed a single actual controversy, and it's been in existence for 4 years, and we've allocated more than $1 million to it over this time, and I wish we would stop arguing about the shape of the table. Let's get the PCOB fully populated. Let's get them to do the whatever tasks come before them. If they run into roadblocks because there's something in the ordinance that they can't do, at least we will have identified that as an actual problem and not a theoretical problem. Then we can fix it. But I think we have to start by fully populating the board.
Okay.
I would like to make one more point, which we're also, this discussion is in the context of kind of a review of boards in general, and we're also looking at other ways of being able to expand board access. I know we've got limitations on compensation, but other avenues of, you know, potentially childcare, dinner, those sorts of things that would also make it more appealing for folks to join. That's all conversations backstage, but that might help with this process, but that's not ready yet, whereas this is something we're ready to do.
Mike, could I ask a question, sir? Michael, Councilor Payne, is it your sense that making this change will make things better, will assist in having more people participate on this board?
I would say probably yes.
Okay.
I mean, I know we've had candidates who were members of both social justice representative organizations and members of disadvantaged communities who've applied who couldn't be appointed, including, you know, individuals who had vouchers who had to move to the county because they wanted more bedrooms and couldn't find that in the city, people who live literally like a 5-minute walk from the city border, who wanted to serve and had deep Charlottesville ties. And again, we're still giving preference to Charlottesville residents first, if any who are Charlottesville residents apply. So I would say yes, and again, I think to me the most important goal is that we gave the PCOB the opportunity to provide feedback to us. It's our decision how we incorporate it. They have given us feedback, and we have actually changed what our amendments were based on their initial feedback, and it's ultimately our decision to make. I'm comfortable with what's in the packet tonight. Okay. And again, representing, recognizing that it's that tiered approach that they brought up in one of their meetings, and this is an iterative process in terms of figuring out how to make the board as strong as possible. But I agree with others in that I think success will require a full board that is able to be out in the community, holding events, holding listening sessions, holding town halls, and really having a huge presence in neighborhoods and being proactive about reaching out on a neighborhood to neighborhood level. And in addition to the city making changes as well, that's going to be a long process, but it all starts with having a fully staffed board, which we haven't had for quite some time.
I just want to chime in that, I know I personally have asked a lot of people, current residents, and I know others have as well, and a lot of people that have the capacity have just been tapped out. We've asked them to do a lot, and they just can't join this. And I know that there are people with deep ties to the community, minorities, and will likely apply, for this. And in the city every day, volunteering and doing things in the city every day will likely volunteer. They'll probably be a very good member of the PCOB. But that being said, do we have a motion, or can we?
Yeah, I would be happy to move the ordinance in the packet, an ordinance to amend and reenact City Code Section 2-453 regarding the residency requirements for members of the Police Civilian Oversight Board.
Can I get a second, please?
Second.
Okay, can we vote?
Put me down for a yes.
Okay, the motion passes 5-0.
Thank you very much.
The next item on the agenda is the ordinance amending the city code for parking of buses, trucks, etc. between midnight and 6 a.m. It's the first of 2 readings.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. Brendan Duncan, I'm the city engineer here for the city of Charlottesville. I'm doing this almost in my previous capacity as the city traffic engineer, though. This has been an issue that the city's been kind of struggling with for a while on some of this. But really, the new zoning code is really what kind of brought this to light. So I just want to start with kind of the overall goal that we have with rewriting this section. That I think it's important to keep in mind as we walk through, some of the different aspects of this. With the changes to the new zoning code and potential for large influx of vehicles needing to utilize street parking, it's a staff's goal to remove uses on the street that are essentially being used as storage, personal storage. We want that street parking to be used for the active turnover of vehicles. So there are several different, additions to this. First one I want to focus on is tarped vehicles. This is one we've been probably struggling with the longest. We have part of the ordinance that speaks to disabled vehicles, vehicles that have expired tags and that kind of stuff. But what we found is it's actually a Fourth Amendment search and seizure issue with city's attorney's office, that the police officers can't lift up a tarp that's covering a vehicle to determine whether or not it actually is a disabled vehicle type of thing. So really, this part of the ordinance is focused on that, just allowing us to enforce our current regulations. So it's not necessarily saying that they can't have a tarp. You can't have a tarp that prohibits the visual inspection of that. So if you wanted to do a clear tarp, if you wanted to have some kind of clear part over just that part of your car, so they can see the license plate, they can see the inspection sticker, all that would still be allowed, but it's really for that enforcement of that. The other one is service repairs. We have several places in town where we've gotten complaints over the years where vehicle service stations don't have enough space on their own lot, so they just continually park vehicles that are waiting to be serviced on the city street. Again, that's not really the purpose of on-street parking. It's intended for active turnover of vehicles and not storage of vehicles that are waiting there, so that's included. Several of the things are just existing in the current ordinance, so semi-trucks, buses, vans, vehicles with more than 2 axles, so that hasn't changed. We left that as is. Farm use tags, hopefully that's self-explanatory. We don't have too many farms in the city of Charlottesville, so just putting that in there so that people have abused some of these in the past, and so it just gives our enforcement a way to enforce that. Antique plates. Antique plates are something that actually the state code speaks to. As the state code reads, and it's 46.2730 if you're interested, that license plates for antique motor vehicles and antique trailers shall not be used for general transportation purposes, including but not limited to daily travel to and from owner's place of employment. The city code, or the state code for this is pretty explicit that this is intended, antique plates are intended for show vehicles, stuff that, it's your old grandpa's truck or whatever, that it's sentimental. You may take it to shows or show it off, every so often, not an everyday commuter vehicle. We also have a lot of antique plates that have been called out that they have antique plates on them, and the car never moves. It never, it just, again, it's more of a storage thing than anything. And with those, you don't have to get inspections, you don't have to do any of that. So again, getting back to the disabled vehicle standard, it makes it very difficult for enforcement of that statute based on if they have an antique vehicle tag that's just sitting in the road. Again, we're not prohibiting any of these on your driveway or anything like that. It's just parking them on the city street. The last few are more, resident storage items, so boats, RVs, and trailers. Again, if we're trying to, reintroduce active parking turnover, those are uses that are more personal storage. We wouldn't allow somebody just to park a shed in the roadway and use it for that purpose. So, it's kind of the same thing, but. Do you have a question, Natalie?
Well, I was just actually thinking about those pods, which are often parked in a parking space in front of a house.
Yeah, so I'll actually get to that in a second. So that was kind of all of, I just wanted to run through kind of the individual use cases. Remy, if you can go on to the next, or do I have the, maybe? I don't know. It's not working. It won't let me advance. If you can advance it. So this is the existing code. Again, it's pretty minimal. It just speaks to the 12-passenger vehicles, trucks, vans, trailer, semi-trailer, recreational vehicle with 2 or more wheels, or 2 or more wheels per axle. So really that's like a dually type trailer and that like larger vehicles. And then, so that's our current statute.
So could I
Yeah.
Just clarity there. So when it says no truck, it's no truck with more than 2 wheels per axle.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, not no trucks. It's all one
Okay.
one sentence there. So it's no trucks with more than 2 wheels per axle. So if you've got a dually or something like that, technically that's not allowed.
So a
to be.
person like on my street who has a really small little RV out sort of, adjacent to their place on the road, it doesn't have 2 wheels per axle, but I guess the new code being suggested would cover that.
Correct. Yep. So yeah, the next line here, if you can go to the next slide, Remy. So this gets into the new code and what we're doing. The highlighted in red section there that I'm showing, that we actually added in after it got into your code, because we kind of, to your point, Natalie, there's a few uses, whether that's, buses or semi-trucks for pavilion events and that kind of stuff that utilize the city street. They get temporary parking permits. Same with the pods, they get temporary permits for those. So really, we will ask that, we add this section to the code if you all are to accept it. Basically just saying, with the exception of instances whereby a temporary parking permit has been obtained. So again, you could get that for any number of these uses if you had a special circumstance. If you had family coming to town and that was the only place that they could park, and you wanted to, get a parking permit for them for the week or something like that, you could do that. It's really, again, trying to keep the storage of these vehicles and stuff off of the city streets. So, but yeah, it covers the semi-trucks, the buses, the vans, antique plates, farm use plates, boats, recreational vehicles, trailers, vehicles with more than 2 axles. Next slide, Remy. And then it gets into the tarp covers is number 2. And number 3 is the working or storage of vehicles for repair shops on the city street. So that's all I have. Actually, I've got a couple slides, more slides, sorry. So these are, I just have a couple examples on the city street. We've got several places where, they're just lined up with RVs. The next slide is probably the most egregious place that I know of in town, where we've got 2 tarped vehicles that have been there as long as I've been at the city, for 10 years, as well as the truck behind it, which has a trailer, which is another tarped vehicle on it that has been there for going on 10 years. So these are the types of instances that we're trying to address across the city. Any questions or?
In the previous slide, the one with the trailers, like if someone was visiting for, week or whatever, they could, and they had a trip, and they could come to the city and get one for 7-10 days or whatever.
Correct. I believe you can get the temporary up to 30 days at a time. So.
And presumably, if it's still attached to the vehicle that brought it there, it still would need to get a temporary.
That's my understanding, unless we were to amend something in the code to change that.
Yeah, I'm struggling with this one. When I was reading it, Councilor Oshrin is beginning to help me see the light on parking being a really, really bad thing. Sorry, I'm not trying to tease you.
No, I love to hear that it's working.
You're helping me. I know we're hoping, and we met the other day with Mr. Freeze and Mr. Sanders about all these things you guys are going to be working on. I remembered later on, one thing that I didn't see on the list was a parking initiative, like, permit parking throughout the city. Where the mayor and I live, there are people that have, pop-up campers, on the road in a small little RV. And there's plenty of space for people to be. And I think too of small businesses. I know one of the things that we want to do with, at some point, commercial uses in residential spaces, this seems like it could cut against that. When I look at, one of the things I worry about is when we use the most egregious offense. If you could go to the next slide, I guess, the one with all the tarps. I mean, that's clearly egregious. I mean, the tarping piece I totally get. I'm with that 100%. But this is more like something that's just been abandoned, as opposed to a person who's got a small boat or whatever that's on the road. I mean, in some places, you know, I guess Belmont, for example, there's just not enough room for, you know, where we live, the streets are a little bigger. So I don't know, I'm torn on this. I guess if there was a citywide sort of layout of where people could buy and sell, and you had almost like a market, you know, of permitting, which I guess at some point we want to get to, I could see this making sense for across the city, but it just seems like it seems a little too onerous to me.
And I actually share a lot of those concerns. I think there's a lot of positive things to move in this direction. I also agree we all know there's egregious examples of basically abandoned vehicles that have been somewhere for years. But I do worry, one, there's areas of the city where off-street parking is tight, and there's areas where it's not an issue at all, as Brian mentioned, where people do have RVs or various things. And I guess I'm just worried this completely blanket universal approach, you're just going to hassle people who have a small business vehicle, potentially like a food truck or something that they're using during the day, and they find an area where it's not an issue to park it, or quite frankly, working class people who have a car that needs an inspection repair and it failed and they don't have the money at the moment and they put a tarp over it, not for 10 years, but maybe for a month or so until they get the money for the repair, because they don't want the police to be ticking them constantly for having an out-of-date inspection, or places where people have an RV or something that is not an issue. And I'm just worried whether it is a valuable or wise use of anyone's time for the police to be going around ticketing everybody for expired inspections or vehicles that aren't an issue. I'm just wondering if there's a more measured way in terms of, like, there's a way to put a notice that if someone doesn't respond to it, to figure out, is it really an abandoned vehicle, or is it something else? Because I just worry I could see this turning into basically just hassling working class people with more and more fines and tickets for expired registrations or expired vehicle inspections, which...
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the police would do it if it wasn't complaints, and people complain to us, and we, you know, contact staff and say, what can you do? And they say, well, we need to amend the ordinance, and so here we are. So I don't think it's, you know, maybe, you know, I don't see it happen a lot, but I see that, you know, my former planner and me said we need tools to deal with this, but, you know, anyway, so what are your thoughts?
Before I get into my thoughts on the substance, I just want to clarify that I believe in the first paragraph, it says exasperated, and it should say exacerbated.
But it may be.
Might have been a reference to how staff feels.
Yeah, it almost fits,
Yeah,
but I just
yeah.
think exacerbated is probably what that was supposed to be.
Probably.
So just wanted to point that out first. Secondarily, I am of the belief that private stuff storage on a public right-of-way is a privilege anyway. It's not something we guarantee. In fact, there's cities that lovely cities that don't allow any on-street parking whatsoever. And those are really nice places to be. So I am generally not inclined to support things that make it easier for, yes, this kind of mess that we see in this particular image. But I am sympathetic to, for your example, a food truck that has to be parked somewhere overnight that maybe doesn't fit in a home garage. And they don't have an open driveway or something like that. So I would be interested in maybe seeing some kind of permit system for that sort of thing. That's more than just the temporary permit, like for the pod. But otherwise, I'm generally in support of this.
Lloyd, you have any thoughts?
Yeah, a couple of them. Hold on just a second.
He's pulling up his legal briefs.
No, what I was trying to do, my phone was ringing at the same time. My thoughts are, first of all, purely a technical thing. In paragraph 2 of the revised 15-144, you need an apostrophe on vehicles, and I don't know whether you intend vehicles to be plural and possessive or singular and possessive, but either way it needs an apostrophe, whether it's apostrophe S or S apostrophe. The second thing I would note, I see a lot of cars driving around with antique plates. It's not, I don't think it's true that people who have antique plates on their car aren't driving them, aren't using them regularly. And if you're assuming that to be the case as one of the reasons behind this change, I think that that's probably wrong. As far as food trucks and so on, as I interpret the statute, a food truck would not be a restricted vehicle for these purposes. It's not a semi-truck, it's not a bus or van, it's not a vehicle with antique plates or farm use plates. A boat, an RV, or a trailer have more than 2 wheels per axle. Most of them. Some of them might. But one of the things to think about is, one of the things that struck me as I was listening to all this discussion is that we, in the zoning ordinance, adopted a number of rules and regulations that basically were intended to prevent people from parking in their front yards. And so if we have made it impossible for them to park in their front yards or to limit the number of vehicles that can be parked in a yard, and we're also saying, and you can't put them on the street either, I wonder what we're doing there. It seems to me that we're being a little, we're just being very restrictive. Maybe the intent is to be just that restrictive, but it's an odd kind of juxtaposition. I'm just curious where the real push for this has come from. Is it specifically from the police department? Is it, who's really asking for this?
Yeah, I mean, the tarped vehicles is really, that one has been requested from the police department. The rest of them are planning and traffic staff, again, looking at the zoning code and complaints that we've gotten over the years, whether it be for RVs that, are parked in front of people's houses that they don't even live there, and, they just park them, to, trailers just being left and there's no parking available on tight streets. Same thing with boats. And kind of to Natalie's point, a fundamental question of should the city right-of-way be used for storage of personal effects. So again, this is more, we put all the different uses we could possibly think of on there. I mean, you all are the decision makers. You can take none of them, you can take all of them, you can cherry pick which ones. We can change wording if you'd like to allow certain uses for whatever, but if as the zoning code sees itself forth over the next several years, there will become an issue with parking in different neighborhoods. You're 100% correct. Some neighborhoods you can drive down and there's 1 car parked on the street and 50 parking spaces available. I 100% agree that that is a fact. There are also areas in the city where they have permit parking now, and we have more requests for parking than there are spaces available on that street. So, trying to limit, and maybe this comes down to we need to have different parking zones, and this only applies to certain parking zones. That's another thing that if you like us to go back and investigate more, we can do that. But, this was an effort to be fair across the city and just say that this is the way it is. But, I do recognize that, it is different in different neighborhoods.
I had a memory of the no parking in the front yard clause that Councilor Snook mentioned, and my memory was that was stricken, and I actually just had confirmation that the front yard is up to 2 units in any R zone can park in the front yard and a driveway, so that has been allowed. That's no longer a thing that people can't do, is turn their yard into a driveway.
Correct. What's council pleasure on this?
Well, I definitely support not letting cars be tarped and abandoned. If we need a resolution to say you can't cover your vehicle's, identification tags or whatever, then I certainly support that. Abandoned vehicles, it seems like there's something to be said about that. Were we planning to do something with like parking across the city in terms of a?
Yeah, we've definitely been talking about that between myself and Ben Chambers. We're still trying to finalize, it's gonna probably be a larger, pricier study to really figure out what to do with permit parking and just parking across the city in general. So we're still formulating that, exactly what that's going to look like before we kind of bring that to management and council.
Yeah, as of now, I'm not inclined to support this, but if we want to defer it to next week and have some more time to think about it and talk amongst ourselves.
Is this one of 2 readings, or?
Yes.
Yeah, this is one of 2 readings.
So I'm inclined to support it, but
Yeah, well, it sounds like maybe it should be moved for the second reading on the regular agenda. At the moment, I'm probably still inclined not to support it, again, from the perspective of just empowering more people to get hit with fines and tickets that I think is, I'm not seeing the benefit outweighing the cost that is, particularly for working class people.
okay. No.
I'd be interested in exploring the idea of maybe a permit system for some of those potentially larger, like food trucks. I don't know how often that scenario comes up, but just in case. I'm also a little bit, the antique vehicle thing might be something to consider as well, where maybe there's some kind of exception if you're like, no, I actually do drive it around.
Well, and again, to Lloyd's point, we do see them driving all over town. It is technically illegal to do that, to just drive it as your personal vehicle that you're driving. Like, it's very explicit.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's very explicit in the state code that it is intended as a recreational, show vehicle type tag. The fact that people drive it, again, I'm not going to be the one enforcing it, but either they're parking a vehicle for long periods of time in the right of way, or it's just sitting there, or they're using it kind of for an illegal use and driving it every day. So that was kind of why that was in there.
That I'm not as concerned about that, but perhaps we could strike some kind of balance with the scenario that Councilor Payne is envisioning, where if someone does get a fine for a inspection delinquency and they are able to come back within 45 days and say, no, look, I got it inspected, there's an ability for them to waive that fine, so that maybe that won't be such a concern.
Yeah, and I don't want to speak for the police, but I think the intent of this is not for them to drive around looking for these. This is really more if they're getting complaints about certain vehicles on certain streets, over a period of time, that, hey, this car hasn't moved in 6 months and it's gotten, that's really the intent of this. It's not, hey, my neighbor, I don't like him and, you need to come give him a ticket, or even just, searching out vehicles on a daily basis. And we don't have the staff for that. in the police department to go out and make rounds of every street in the city, and like we do on the downtown, parking around the downtown. I mean, that's a job in and of itself, so.
So, yeah, but that all being said, I generally do support this sort of initiative.
Lloyd, where are you?
Undecided, lukewarm, not sure beyond that.
Okay. Okay, so we're going to bring it back in 2 weeks.
Okay.
And
That's fine.
yeah. Thank you
for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Brennan.
All right. The next item on the agenda is a resolution for revisions to the Architecture Design Control District Design Guidelines. Jeff, how you doing, sir?
I'm all right, I guess. The clicker's not working, so.
Jeff, just check and make sure it's turned on.
Put it away so I don't play.
Jeff, check and make sure that the clicker's turned on.
Let's see.
It's flashing, it may not be. There
Look
you
at
go.
that. All right. Give you guys a preview. All right, so quickly, good evening. I'm Jeff Warner. I'm the city's preservation design planner, and as you all know, I wear 3 primary hats. I'm staff of the Planning Commission in their role as the Entrance Corridor Review Board. I'm staff of the Historic Resources Committee, and in my main role is I'm staff with the Board of Architectural Review, the BAR, which is the hat I'm wearing tonight. And with me tonight, I have James Seymour, the current chair of the BAR, and in the back, Kate Richardson, who is the Assistant Preservation and Design Planner. I told her she could go home tonight, but she really wanted to stick around and see this. So, slide 2. The requested action by council tonight is to formally adopt revisions to Chapter 5, Section E of the ADC District Design Guidelines, which address outdoor cafes. The reason for updating these guidelines is to better align them with how the cafe spaces have evolved over time. And in fact, the guidelines currently using haven't changed much since 1995. And allow time for you all to review the revisions and adopt them ahead of March 1st, 2025. That's when the cafe spaces will next be renewed. Per city code, the BAR is required to review design guidelines and to recommend to you all for formal adoption any changes. And before I go further, I want to make sure everyone understands that the design guidelines in and of themselves are not regulations. They do not prohibit or regulate anything. They are intended to protect what the city has identified as valuable historic resources. Council adopts the guidelines, council appoints the BAR to apply them, and all BAR actions are appealable to council. Second, the guidelines for cafe spaces are intended to allow for administrative review by staff, and except for the grandfather elements, which we'll discuss, anything that is not recommended or not permitted or possibly not addressed by the guidelines simply means that I can't approve it administratively. So for example, if someone wants oversized multicolored umbrellas or bright red furniture, they would have to review that with the BAR and not me. And of course, if denied by the BAR, appealable to City Council. As I mentioned, the revisions as drafted will allow the continued use of existing ADA-compliant metal railings and the overwhelming majority of the existing tables, chairs, and furniture, and I think if not all of them. And finally, there are elements in some of the cafe spaces that violate zoning, and these are not under BAR's purview. For example, the code prohibits umbrellas from extending outside cafe spaces. It regulates the signage that's allowed inside a space, and it requires zoning approval, not BAR approval, to use propane heaters. So just to be clear, those zoning requirements will be enforced regardless of any changes to the design guidelines. So very quickly, the Brick Paved Mall, sidewalk at the corner are city-owned public spaces, both within city-designated ADC districts. The mall is listed on the Virginia Landmarks Register and the National Register, and it is also within a larger historic district that is also listed. The corner is listed on the State and National Register as well as part of the Rugby Road University Corner Historic District. The mall was designed in 1974 by Lawrence Halpern and Associates with a focus on it being an open space, a public space, and a place that people could see through without visual clutter. And the goal was to create a sequence of interconnected spaces where people could walk and gather and view the trees, see the amenities like the fountains. In the early 1980s, the city approved 3 requests for leased spaces on the mall, and that has grown since. In 1993, there were 12 spaces, 2004, 21, and in 2020, there were 39. Per the city code, the cafe spaces are allowed in leased spaces within the public right-of-way. These require an annual permit that is issued by zoning. And also per the code, for spaces within an ADC district, the elements within the space are subject to design review by the BAR, and those elements such as furniture, planters, and railings. And so on the mall in the corner, we currently have 44 restaurants operating leased cafes. They range from 80 square feet to 1,300 square feet, and currently approximately 20% of the downtown mall is used for cafe spaces. The design guidelines for the ADC districts were first adopted by council in 1995, including a section for outdoor cafes. The general guidelines were updated in 2004 and most recently 2012. However, there were no significant changes to the outdoor cafe guidelines since '95. So recently, and on September 17th, October 1st, and October 15th, the BAR held advertised work sessions regarding the guidelines for the outdoor cafes. The BAR first established a list of broad guiding principles to guide their discussions, and the overarching principle is that elements within leased cafe spaces should be subordinate to the experience and treatment of the surrounding public space. And ahead of the October 15th meeting, when the BAR voted on the guidelines, we hand-delivered a letter to each of the operators of the leased cafe spaces, notifying them of the meeting, and we delivered a similar letter notifying them of tonight's meeting. Let's see. So the BAR's evaluations encompass 5 primary themes: materiality, color palette design, prioritization of public space, and the visual elements. So materiality came down, similar to what's always been in there. Elements should be quality, durable material. It means that they'll stand up over time and not start to look like they've been outside for a year. Things not be permanently installed, and that they are easily moved. And that's mainly because this is a public space. And if the city has to go out and fix something or address something or maintain something, they don't need to be lifting up 1,000 pounds of dirt in a planter. And again, preference for metal, not plastic. For the color palette, for example, furniture and rails, black or silver tone are preferred, and this has been in the guidelines for over 20 years. Another example, umbrellas, and I want to say there's absolutely nothing in this draft that bans colorful umbrellas. I don't know where that came from. A little frustrating to hear that, but that's what happens. And I'll read.
That narrative got out there.
It got out there, and this is right from the draft. Prefer solid colors. Variation requires BAR approval. Relative to design, and this is sort of overall, within each space, the elements should be compatible. And then for all of the spaces together, the idea is that we have something cohesive, that there's some visual continuity on the mall. Again, the mall is a public space. As far as prioritizing the public space, the cafe elements should be within the leased space. Now, that's required by the code, but we're also emphasizing that in the BAR guidelines. And the elements, the placement of them, the size of them should reduce visual clutter and not obstruct views. Again, this is prioritizing the pedestrian experience over patrons in these spaces. And BAR also wants to encourage full access to the fountains. The visual elements, again, the mall is a public space, and so the elements within the cafes, we understand to enhance the patron experience, but they shouldn't serve as advertisements or distractions to pedestrians. I mean, there's a lot of times that these spaces are not being operated, and those moments, this space should be public and not looking through plants and advertisement and signs. And then, so finally, again, on October 15th, the BAR voted 8-0 to recommend that you all council approve the revisions being presented tonight. And I think also want to clarify that there are some some circumstances in there that we pointed out. For example, the items that are grandfathered, while they aren't listed in the guidelines, because we want those to be the guidelines moving forward, the points made by the BAR and relative to existing elements, just want to make sure that you all understood that in capturing that in the resolution. So, sorry that was awfully fast. I know there are some questions. I know there's been a lot of emails flying around that people have asked me to respond to, and I think James is here certainly to offer any perspective he can, and with that, anything I can help you with.
Brian, yeah, we'll start with you, sir.
Well, yeah, Mr. Zimmerman, if you want to come up and join us. I want to thank you and the BAR and Jeff and all the work that you guys have done on this and on so many other things. I know in a conversation earlier today, Mr. Zimmer, you had some points you thought might be relevant for folks to understand. If you
Sure.
get a minute to share some of those.
Sure. I mean, I think Jeff covered a lot of it pretty well. I think one thing folks should understand is we did work really hard over 3 different work sessions that the public was invited to. The BAR is made up of a group of people that are volunteers, and a number of us are what you might call subject matter experts. We've got architects and historians, that type of thing. We also have folks on the BAR who are simply residents in a historic district or business owners in a historic district. So what I think is great about that is that gives balance to our decision making, and it drives us to make compromises and make consensus decisions. And that's really what drove the recommendations in this revision. There were some things that I didn't like, there were some things someone else didn't like, and we had to kind of meet in the middle and kind of drive what was for the best for the public good for the downtown mall. Let's see. I think, as Jeff said, yes, the umbrellas, the current guidelines actually say that they should be solid neutral colors, i.e. beige or black or white. We are actually dialing that back and saying that we would allow color, any color. It just needs to be a solid color. And I think Jeff pointed out correctly that if someone wants to kind of deviate from the guidelines, there's a path forward with that, and it is our process. It's the COA, Certificate of Appropriateness process, right? You want to change something, bring it to the BAR, and then we discuss it and vote on it.
And then if they don't like the BAR's decision, they could appeal it to City Council as well.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Let's see. I think, as Jeff pointed out, I just want to reinforce this is a public space. It is a National Historic Landmark. It is, I think, the longest lasting pedestrian mall, certainly in the state of Virginia, that has been successful. So I think that in itself is a testament to the downtown mall and to the investment that the city of Charlottesville made in the downtown mall. The citizens back in 1976 decided to take on this experiment, and they took a risk in doing so. So I think it's our duty to champion it and make sure that it lasts for future generations in a quality environment for the citizens of Charlottesville. As Jeff pointed out, kind of our overarching themes were respecting the original design intents, minimizing visual clutter both across and up and down the mall. We talked about the fact that there's a change in elevation as you walk up and down the mall. So when you're a little bit lower down, your eye level, may be distracted by things that are further up the mall. Those were kind of the main things that were our overarching guidelines. And I think beyond that, take any questions y'all may have. Thank you.
Thank you, James.
Yeah. Thank you again for serving on the committee. Comments? And let me go to Lloyd. Lloyd, you got any thoughts?
Yeah, my first thought is that I wanted to give a shout out to Natalie for her very thoughtful email today with sort of a different view of things, and yes on some things and not so fast on some other things. And Natalie, all I can say is I think I agree with you on everything.
That's nice to hear. Thanks.
Is that it, Lloyd?
Well, I mean, we can. I assume Natalie.
I'm gonna run down the list. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. I wasn't sure.
Yeah. Did you want to go?
Sure. I mean, I guess I could just provide the comments. I mean, I guess my thoughts were, I guess stepping back. I think people have sometimes beat up on the BAR. I've done it myself sometimes, but I think in part was mentioned. The downtown mall is many things. One of them is it has a sense of unique place in history, and I think anywhere in the country or world that maintains a unique sense of place in history does so with intentionality and planning. I appreciate a more libertarian perspective, and there's trade-offs of that, but you will have a change in the uniqueness of place, or at least the history of it as well. When it comes to these specifically, I guess my perspective is I think the BAR has always had a tiered approach in terms of layering that historic preservation in terms of there's guidelines. It's not an outright ban. If somebody thinks there's a strong case to adjust it, they can appeal it to the BAR, and the BAR can either approve it or deny it. And even if the BAR denies it, they can still appeal it to City Council. And I think that provides a lot of flexibility if someone has a good idea that falls outside of guidelines for 2 passes at it to see if it works, while still striking that balance of ensuring you don't have a chain like Five Guys or Sweet Green come in who have been on the mall in the past, who maybe have standardized corporate materials that they may decide to use instead. And we've also seen that in the corner as well with corporations like Sheetz or Chipotle coming in. So I'm sure, like, there are specific things in this that could change, and I'm not going to, die on that hill and be like it's upset, like it's the worst thing in the world. But I would say generally, I think the approach the BAR has put forward to me makes sense. Again, in the context of it can always be appealed both to the BAR and then City Council, because I do think it's important to have a balance where there are some protections, particularly on the downtown mall. And I think there's a balance between doing that and then preventing, weaponization of it to prevent any change, which has happened, in the past and across the country, but I don't think that's what's happening here. But in any case.
Hey, okay, thanks. So I sent a little list of questions this morning. I know that isn't a ton of time for everyone to review, but I'll just kind of run through them quickly with the preamble that I included in my note that I very much appreciate the effort that staff and the BAR have put into reviewing and discussing them all in these updates. I went back and watched the October 17th meeting, and I reviewed the notes from the work session. I couldn't find if there was a video recording of the other work sessions, so.
There wasn't for the first. No,
Okay, yeah, but it was good to hear the discussion that you all had on the 17th and to read the notes. Some of that discussion wasn't captured in the notes, so some of my questions are just, how did we reach the conclusion that was noted? But I also want to provide a little color that I have been a server and a manager in these cafe spaces, which I know the BAR has unique perspectives from historical preservation and architectural backgrounds, but I don't know if anyone was ever actually a staff member on the mall in that capacity. So I've actually been the person to set up and break down some of these spaces in my time. So with all that noted, I do have some questions and just comments that I'll run through. One, I agreed with the discussion that you all had on the 17th to remove any regulations on tablecloths and cushions. We did use tablecloths when I worked there, so yeah, use it or not, whatever. I think that's a smart move that we don't have to worry about that. There was a discussed rationale for limiting the width of planters, and that was that they needed to be manually movable, and larger planters would be too heavy, which, yes, dirt is heavy quickly. But is there anything preventing the use of casters on larger planters to allow them to be moved easily if necessary? Like, would it damage the bricks, or was it just not discussed?
And how do you want to,
You want us to talk to each one of these?
Yeah, I'll wait.
So I just want to, one of the things, and this is a good primer for you all about, so we've got much more to tackle with the design guidelines overall. And so how some of the, give some thought to that, as not tonight, but as we're
Yeah,
moving
so,
forward.
so
that's
Jeff,
gonna
if you
take-
go, as you go forward, she has about 20
know.
bullets, so I want you to like bam, bam.
I will bam it. But the thing with the BAR is what they're charged with, and right from the code, it's their focus is on that historic character, that National Register district. That is what they're instructed to create design guidelines for. So, so quickly, the BAR was asking why there was ever anything in there about tablecloths and cushions, so good to go there. The widths and size of the planters, a lot of that has to do with, as I said, you know, when something has to be moved or relocated, it takes up a lot of space. We've got those metal planters, we don't know what damage they might be doing underneath them to the mall. Fury has a cafe space that is on casters, and I don't think any of us have a problem with things being movable. There's things out there. So if someone wants to put something on casters, the primary thing is that it's that height and that mass. And it's also where we're seeing this proliferation of planters outside of the cafe spaces, where they're creating an artificial hedge. And so by sort of managing the size of the location of these, that's the goal. Whether they're movable or not, that's not a problem.
Yeah, and that, just in terms of the hedge, we're again trying to minimize like visual obstructions. We're trying to prevent like people creating walls that you can't see through. And so if you have a much larger planter, that could accommodate a much larger plant, right?
Yeah, essentially the guidelines as written, if someone came in and said, I want to build a 6-foot trellis around here and start a hedge going on it, there's nothing in the current guidelines where I would say you can't do that. So that's some of what we've done here. Now, as far as high quality and compatible, again, that language
Well,
that's been
just
in there. Go ahead. Yeah.
for the people at home who don't have this list, I would still like to read them.
Oh, you like, okay,
Yeah.
then continue.
Yeah, but, okay, so casters are not specifically prohibited, but that could potentially allow a heavier planter to be movable, which solves that problem.
It really is. If someone, now, the big metal troughs are just outside of the character of what, and that's where we came down on, or the BAR came down on. But if they're movable, if someone wants to put things on casters, that's fine. As long, I mean, not fine, but the key is they're within their space that they've leased, and the height and size of it isn't overwhelming the character of the mall.
Okay, thank you. So the next question I had was some of the language seems hard to definitively measure, like high quality and compatible. And then what constitutes a prolonged period of time that would require items to be removed?
So there are, you're referring to things were in the guideline, or in the principles that the BAR adopted to help make some decisions. Now, some of this is certainly subjective. You know, what does the wood bench outside of Rapture look like it's in bad shape? To me, yes, it needs to be cleaned up and revarnished. Now, someone might say, oh, it looks old and rustic. There's a certain amount of judgment that comes in here. If something looks like, there are pots, and I had some photos we could show, but there are plants in pots on the mall that are dead. There are pots that are broken. To me, that is, not being well maintained, not well kept. And we can say those need to be removed. So it is some judgment here, but there's still a process by which someone can say, I disagree with you. I'm going to ask the BAR. So we're not the police. I'll say, I live in a house that's subject to BAR review. We have 4 members of the BAR that live in houses and buildings or work in buildings subject to BAR review. So we understand that. All right, I don't know if that answered it, but that's...
Well, and then prolonged period, like, what is that? 3 days? Is it a month? Because that portion is in regards to if a
there are some,
lease is
this is where I work a lot.
Space that's unleased for a certain amount of time, but it just says prolonged
zoning
period.
officials. So it's just, we're not out there on the mall every day saying, let's somebody hasn't been here for 2 days, let's, move all their stuff, but there are provisions in the ordinance, and I said, I can't do anything unless I work with the zoning officials, and that's, I mean, I don't know exactly how to answer it.
Well, do we need to set, like, you know, if there's a 2-month gap in between leases,
I can
stuff
answer
has to
that.
be removed, or?
Yeah, I can look at the cafe space.
Once a lease is over, if it's not renewed, I would think they would remove everything from the cafe space.
Yeah, I'm guess could be a situation where the new leaseholder hasn't moved it in yet for, you know, a couple weeks, and like, is all
Again,
this stuff gonna?
I mean, this is a system, and, you know, I just, what I work with the zoning officials on and manage, you know, we have discussions about things. These aren't issues I get the BAR involved with necessarily. So I think I have to talk to Craig and Reed and give you a finite answer on that. But I don't know, it said it was just one of the principles that the BAR adopted of, hey, we really want, if these spaces aren't being used, you know, that idea that it's a public space, but there's nothing enforceable in here. Each space has to get a certificate of appropriateness. So by March 1st, we will have those for each space. So if something's going on in there that's not what we discussed and not what we approved, then I can say to them, hey, this doesn't match what your COA was. So it's, and if a space is not leased and there's stuff going on there, then I'll talk to zoning and say, well, why are these things being stored there, that type of thing. But
Okay, so we don't necessarily need a definition for that.
I think there's one in the ordinance, and let me talk to zoning and I can answer that question
Okay,
better.
cool, thank you. And then included in the documents we got, and in the October 17th meeting, you said you added this, calling the downtown mall Charlottesville's living room, which objectively is a phrase that I like. But it seems like within this particular document, it's either missing broader context, or it doesn't seem like we're actually doing enough to make it so. You know, there's room for the public to disagree with the statement because we don't provide much public seating, and we removed some of that. There's no bathrooms, there's no play areas, there's no interactive displays, all of that. So I think for the purposes of this particular document, we either should add that context or not use that phrase.
So the phrase came from, and I can't recall the exact citation, but I believe it was a mayor or a former mayor at the time when the mall was coming to be, and that statement was made. So that's sort of been out there as a
Yeah, and
phrase.
I like that. I
Yeah.
just don't know if we need
And
it
now
for
as
this
far,
document.
and I think what we use that in the context of to express the importance, the design intent of this as a public space. Now, to the things that you're talking about, there's no doubt been a lot of discussion about the privatization of the mall and the loss of the space. I mean, I moved here in '96, so I remember when, you know, there was, things were gone, even in winter, the cafe spaces were gone. So there's been a shift in that. But I would say if you all are uncomfortable, the only place this appears is in the guiding principles and even in notes. So it's not
Yeah, it's not a major thing.
and you all can strike it if you wish.
I don't have a problem striking
Yeah.
that phrase. I think Jeff's right. The intent was to just reinforce the fact that this is a public space and that they're publicly leased spaces, and that, in my mind, it's different from a cafe space that's outside a restaurant, that restaurant owner owns that space
Mhm.
and they can do whatever they want with it. I mean, in a ADC, they might have to come to us, but, you know, I think it's the sentiment that the downtown mall belongs to the citizens of Charlottesville.
All right, got a lot more bullets. Go ahead.
Okay. Why are lights not permitted on railings, under counters, or in planters?
This went to our discussion of things inside the space, and that, you know, the mall we have lights on the mall, we have plants on the mall, we have what the city maintains on the mall. The cafe spaces can add catenary lighting, they can put lighting on the table, but when we started to have things that could not be removed when these spaces are not open, and that sort of became that visual clutter that we've been talking about. So that was the thinking of, you know, there's enough lighting for this, they don't need to add these things. Now, if somebody wants to add lights on their railing, they can come and ask the BAR. But for my review of the COA, that's a no. I would not approve that administratively.
Yeah, I think that's something that if it's, this term visual clutter seems like something we've all kind of agreed on, but I think other people would say stuff to look at. And
When? That was sort of so the cafe spaces are used, it's surprisingly how infrequent the spaces are used. So you've got stuff being stored there, wrapped on the railings there. You've got stuff in our public space, the city's public space. And so that's what was driving some of this is that necessary for that to be there 24/7? And the feeling was no.
I think there's also, with the catenary lights, and with the overall design of the downtown mall, with the light fixtures and the planters from the Lawrence Halpern design, like that gives continuity across the length of the mall, all the way up and down. And so by having consistency in the lighting all the way down the mall, you maintain that consistency, right?
well, I mean,
But
there's
then-
already that's already there. So this is other stuff that gets to define personality for each cafe. And I don't think that
I think
gets in the way of the continuity, because the continuity is there in the fact that it's brick.
Yeah, but I think.
That's the overwhelming
lighting- I think
feeling when you're
lighting-
there.
I think lighting, if your lighting is consistent, it gives a good consistent appearance across the entire mall.
I mean, I know one thing that we're looking at is having lights up more year round. So this seems like an unnecessary regulation.
I disagree.
I think I'll just offer that, just from the concern of what is possible without parameters. You can have flashing lights every third, fifth, and
Well, I think you could
seventh
say no flashing
location.
lights.
So I think that's part of it. So it's what is the true desire? And I'm speaking to what kinds of things I remembered hearing coming up while we were doing the downtown mall committee work. There's always going to be a counter opinion, but what kind of standard are we wanting to set, I think, is really what I'm hearing.
To clarify again, process, am I off or correct in that these are guidelines, and I guess the philosophy as it is, you have guidelines that lean kind of heavier on preventing like a worst outcome. And if someone thinks that's a little too strict, I think this is a good idea, they can come to you for an appeal.
Yep.
And then even if you say no, it can come to us for the final decision.
That's right.
So
Yeah.
no matter what, we have the final say over like, this was a little too strict.
And I think that's a lot of hours spent on something like a light twisted around a railing.
So there's only two places that have light ropes, LED ropes on railings, and there's one that has some solar lamps on the railings. I will say lighting is one of the things we've had to deal a lot with at the BAR, and with LED technology, and you're right, the blinking, so it's simply easier to say, when I review it, no, we don't have it there. Now, you can't use city power to illuminate. So you can do it with solar and battery, but again, it's up to you all. If these are recommendations, and I think we've expressed why, but you all can decide to keep it or not.
Sure, that's fine. If, we get a chance to revise this, I would move to strike that particular regulation. The next question is, what was the discussion about wine barrels? Because the conclusion that you made is that wine barrels are not permitted.
It's been in the guidelines for a long time, and there was agreement on this. Unfinished wood is not allowed, and these barrels tend to be unpainted, unfinished wood. So, but again, you all can make a decision on that, but that's the recommendation, just that they tend to be unsightly. I live in the winemaker's house down on Wine Street, so believe me, I get it about the history of wine in this town. And if they were wine barrels, I guess I would view them differently, but the BAR's position is they were unpainted wood, unfinished wood, and they tend to be a little bit unsightly. They're large and take up a lot of space.
These are the big casks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We did have a lot of back and forth on that. There are some folks who thought we should have them. So I think that's one where, pending the restaurant, like if it's a wine shop or something, like, yeah, we might approve it,
Yeah, that's one that I also think is unnecessary for us to get out ahead of and turn down. especially
I
because
think it was more about it falling under the category of unfinished wood.
Yeah.
And making more of sort of a blanket statement on that than, again, to your point, if you start going down into the minutia of every single, like, what if,
Yeah.
it was just a rabbit hole that.
Well, I think you could say no unfinished wood, and then if the wine barrel is finished,
Yes,
bada bing,
that's right.
saves an appeal. The reason why I brought that up was, yeah, because we market ourselves as the center of Virginia wine country. So, you know, wine barrels are cute little cocktail tables. And then why no feed trough style planters?
I think A, they're very large and therefore difficult to move, and I think they're just out of character. I mean, they're made for agricultural use. They're not meant to be a planter. They're meant to be a feed trough.
Okay, so yeah, again, if they're on wheels, I don't really see a problem with that for movability. They're an economical way to get plants, and plants are lively. The next one is, why do we need to regulate the maximum length of tables?
Same reason. That is a large, heavy thing that has to be moved. And we debated a lot about like sizes and things, but the idea is that these are not permanent spaces. These are not owned. This is a public space that the city allows them to use, not move into. And I think that idea of that mobility of these things, you've got a lot of stuff in there, you could go out there and move in an hour. There are places where you'd need a forklift to get things out of the way. So that's sort of where that sense of this is still a public space. This is not someone's private dining room.
Yeah.
We also talked about if you have, smaller tables, you can certainly group them together for a larger party, right?
Yeah, and I think that's something that a restaurant should be able to decide on their own. I don't think we need to regulate that. And then what is the ban on temporary decorations? What does that mean? Like balloons,
There
bunting,
is
signage?
no ban on temporary decoration. I don't know where I honestly,
Wasn't it like all over this?
I mean, it says temporary decorations, but not permanent. Like you don't put up your Halloween stuff and it stays the whole year. There are places on the mall where some things have gone up and they're just, it's like, they're pennants and flags and balloons and banner things or whatever, pom-pom things. It's like, all right, this is a public space. But this is what the BAR's recommendation is. This does not have to be council's recommendation. You all can view them all differently. You all can change this. So I guess what I'm saying is that's the answer if you want to. I don't think I'm going to convince you. And I don't mean that in a rude way.
Well, yeah, it says elements inconsistent with the guidelines and currently in place within a leased space must be removed. Temporary decorations unless for a current holiday or special event. And so I was just wondering, like, does that mean if a couple is celebrating a wedding and they want balloons, they would have to come to the BAR to ask if they could put up balloons?
No, that's a temporary thing. Now, if 2 months from now the balloons are there and they've popped and fallen over, then I'm going to go and say, you really should pick those up. But in the resolution, it's not prohibited. It's just simply that temporary seasonal decorations are fine. They should not become permanent.
Okay.
And again, that's just a judgment call. There's a lot of things we have to make judgments on relative to design issues. And so, yes, if something's up, hey, it's been up, this is Halloween, it's been up there, it's May, really, that type of, that's an
You had a few
absurd
more,
example,
Natalie?
but that's the point.
And then how come no decor on poles and railings?
I think minimizing visual clutter. Again, I mean, we had these like sort of overarching values that we went back to that were kind of driving
Yeah.
a lot of our decision making.
Okay. And then muted colors for equipment and serving counters also seems like an unnecessary regulation.
No, again, this is that visual, right now, most of the stuff is wire and metal. I was out the other day, and somebody had a rollout thing, which is great. It was this bright red thing. That's fine for rollout, but if it's when these things stay on the mall, they go out there, they don't go back in, they become, again, they end up being stored on the mall. So things like the counters, the host stand, we're saying keep those, we didn't say black, we say muted color, so that when that space is not in operation, that the mall, it's not interfering with that experience of the mall. That's all it is.
I mean, I guess whose experience? The people are there
Well,
to
this
enjoy
again,
that
you're
space,
we're telling
right?
you what the BAR discussed and determined. I don't know
Right,
if
and
you
I'm
want to
trying
get
to
into a
understand
debate
the
with me
discussions.
about it.
Yeah.
Now, the point is the mall is a historic landmark, and the BAR's charge was to look at these guidelines through the lens of preserving that historic space. And that's the best answer I can give you. But if you think that we shouldn't do that, you all are the elected officials,
Yeah.
not them, so.
Yeah. I'm just trying to help myself understand how these conclusions were reached.
I think some of it, to answer your question a little bit, some of it was, we were going based on what the current guidelines are, right? Which is to encourage those types of muted colors. And so where we felt the guideline was sufficient and was working well, we left it as is.
I think that's the one thing too that maybe you could mention. There's a little bit of anchoring or whatever is the, in other words, they started off with a set of, I think some of the things, I guess maybe that you have concerns about might have been part of the original.
Yeah, and I reviewed that.
And so if we're going to go back to that, I guess y'all felt like your charge was to take that as sort of a starting point and
Absolutely.
and iterate
Yeah,
based
we
off
weren't
that.
trying to, our charge wasn't to rewrite the guidelines, it's to revise the guidelines. You know, and try and do that with, honestly, as minimal a hand as possible, you know, where making, kind of nudging it
So
this
some
way
of the,
and
I
that.
think some of the frustration that people may have is just frustration with the original guidelines.
Possibly so. I think they're also, you know, Brian and I spoke earlier, when COVID hit and there was a much greater need for people to be outside for public safety's sake, some of the guidelines were relaxed. They were. You know, and I think we're trying to rein that in. I think that the message to rein it in, actually, you mentioned the Downtown Mall Committee. We've heard from that committee that they wanted things to get reined in and that the downtown mall to kind of get cleaned up. So we're
Yeah.
responding to that. You know, one person in the committee also said, like, these are for the most part, restaurants, like, let the food be what's on show, you know?
Okay. That, I mean, the restaurant gets to decide what their feature is. I think that's part of the thing, is like, we don't have to decide that for them. I guess, I mean, I can assume the answers to a couple of the next ones, but no signage on umbrellas, even if it's the logo of the restaurant?
Right, and that's been in there, and that's the sign regs guide signage.
Okay.
So that's long been part of that visual clutter. We would prefer that not have, I mean, the sign regs are very limited, so the restaurant, the business can determine where they want to use their signage. And that's not, the BAR reviews only the design of what's allowed by zoning.
Okay, and that I wasn't necessarily fighting for. I was just curious about where that came from. But solid colors are all matching. That also feels a little precious to me. And then what does pole-mounted heater mean? Is that the mushroom heater that I linked to?
We didn't know what, we find that things, you know, you say, all right, well, what's the right word for this? We debated whether to call them wine casks or barrel casks or wood barrels, so it's a propane heater. Those heaters are all regulated by the fire department, and they have to be approved by zoning, and there's some policy issues where the city manager's involved, so.
I just wasn't sure if
Yeah.
that was what that was referring to, or if there was a
we did
different
a-
type of heater. I wasn't sure.
Well, we had a lot of discussion about what if, you know, people came out and someone built stone and put in a propane fireplace, you know.
Right, and I saw that those were not allowed, so this is just a question about the heaters. And then the hanging planter question kind of ties into, there's the cafe spaces that are along the center of the mall, and then there's the seating that's directly in front of some of the restaurants.
That singularly is about if something's hanging on the railing, it's got to be inside the space. So there are some places on the mall now where people have like the planters you hang on your front porch, and so they're hung on the rail, but they're in that public space.
Okay, but let's say it was on like a shepherd's hook above your head
If
and
it's
had a
not
hanging
within,
planter.
if it's within the public space. Now, we did establish some height requirements because we don't want to create
Right, and
a
I
hedge.
saw that.
Right.
But the public space is really a zoning issue, right? That's not BAR per se.
Yeah, but just in the attachments to railings portion, it doesn't say no hanging planters outside of the space.
right.
It just says
They
no
could hang
hanging
it on the
planters,
inside.
period. Yeah, it just says no hanging planters, period.
Then we can clarify that. I mean,
Yeah, I think that's worth
again, this is-
clarifying.
You're trying not to write this thing so prescriptive that it.
Well, that's what I'm trying
Yeah,
to,
right.
to do, undo.
It's
And
also where
then,
images, when we format the guidelines, images provide a lot of assistance.
okay. And then the catenary lights, which are the hanging lights, for people who needed to look that word up, like I did. It says no covers on the bulbs and on round poles, and no holiday lights without permission. So why do the poles have to be round? Why no lanterns like the cute little pictures that I included? And for the holiday lights, couldn't we just have dates where you're allowed to have holiday lights and then
You could.
that's it?
The round or square, I think I was just looking at what's available, and we've got some stuff out there that's like, looks like a piece of conduit, and it's bent and twisted. So the primary thing was, how's it attached to the railing? Is it kept straight? And how are the lights connected to it and not, wrapped on there with duct tape? So it's more of an appearance. I don't think it matters which way. Round seemed to be what we defaulted to, but that's a very good point. As far as things on the lights, these are to illuminate the space. Once people start, hanging, lit butterflies and lit lanterns and things on them, that's changing that space. Again, these are spaces that when they're being used, that's fine, but the, 18 hours a day that they aren't, these things then are being essentially stored on the mall. So it goes to that point of that visual clutter of, if you want to put lights on the tables, great. If you want to have catenary lights, that's great. But, you want to start putting lanterns and things out there that stay out there.
Well, these were
that was
these were
the-
catenary lights, but with a cover on them.
When you say a cover, you mean like a decorative feature?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's really where we came down with that simple bulb lamp. That's okay. Otherwise, no.
Could I ask a question?
Yeah, there's just a couple left.
Okay. I'll wait.
Okay. And so, yeah, I think for the holiday lights, because I know this was something that Carl brought up, you all said, have it on the building, but not the cafe space. Again, I don't think that really needs to be regulated, so, if you want to have it from, mid-November through mid-January
I
or
think the
something.
tricky part there is that there are all sorts of different holidays all throughout the year, and so it's really tough to define an exact period of time for whatever holiday someone wants to honor. I would support, it's similar to holiday decorations, right, or what you were talking about earlier, so, yeah,
Yeah.
It's a tricky
So,
one.
Sam, I just had a quick question. I'm trying to figure out how we're going to do, because, I agree and disagree with some of the things. I don't want, it seemed like you all are agreeing, y'all are
Yeah, I
coming to a
was-
consensus. I'm just want to make sure. Okay.
You don't need, the BAR has provided its recommendation.
Right, this is a recommendation, and you can determine what parts of it you accept or do not accept.
I promise there's just a couple
Okay,
more.
go. Sure.
On page 6, it says no outdoor furniture is permitted, and I think that's just supposed to be a colon instead of a comma.
Yeah, I think that one deserved, the idea was, someone comes out and has, huge,
Yeah, like don't put a couch out
yeah,
there.
year-round, the big, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
okay, great. I just wanted to make sure that that was just a typo.
Not a typo, I think, it would be helpful if you have a better way to say it, or if you have.
Well, I think it matches the line right above it if you just put a colon instead of a comma.
Oh, yeah.
Because then it's like outdoor furniture, for example, these two things.
Sure.
So, and then I'll skip the next one and just head to the last one. There wasn't any discussion in here about anything about tenting in the winter or for any special events. Is that talked about somewhere else?
Yes, that's a separate issue, and it's, in fact, that was updated in 2013 or 2014, I think. The BAR recommended things to address tents on the mall. And I'll also say, when COVID hit, it was within a couple of days of the first request. Craig Fabio and I put together okay, if we're going to do tents on the mall, here's a policy. The city manager's office approved it. I think only a couple places took advantage of that. But I would say that once you start tenting the mall, once you start building enclosures on the mall, you're changing things.
And
So,
my
yeah.
suggestion was just we have that linked in these regulations so that it's all in one place.
It's on the next page, actually,
Oh.
in the guidelines. Well, you don't have it because I try to not unload everything on you.
Got it. Okay, so in the broader text,
Yes,
it's right there.
yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, those were my questions. I guess my overarching feeling, and this is what I sent earlier, was that, and this is the response we've been getting from the general public, who are the people using the mall. It's a living, breathing historical piece of architecture. It's not in a museum. Is that they want the downtown mall to be charming and bohemian and unique and have specific characteristics attached to specific restaurants, and that's not something the city should overregulate. It's not sterile, it's not homogeneous, it's not an outlet mall, it's not a theme park. So I'm comfortable with the city sticking with structural and right-of-way guidelines and that sort of thing, but I think some of the things that were on here were, as the kids say, a little extra. And I think we can reel some of that back in and be a little more general with the design principles that we're letting these spaces use.
Yeah, and I think I would respond to that and say, someone said earlier tonight, this is gonna, we're not gonna be able to do certain things. And I guess I would ask for an example of where is this, where are these guidelines becoming exclusive of someone operating a cafe space or using that cafe space? That's, and I don't mean that, I try to understand where these, maybe if someone believes they've gone too far.
Yeah, I guess one thing I would say, did you have any other?
I guess just my last clarifying point is that the term that you've been using often is visual clutter and assuming that by nature it's a bad thing. And I would say not everybody would agree with that.
Yeah, and that's actually directly from Mr. Halpern's notes and actually some of the comments from architects who have been involved in this discussion, so.
I
think clutter is, up to the eyes of the observer perhaps, but if clutter is clutter to you, then it looks like clutter.
Again, like I mentioned earlier, I think some of that, maybe visual distraction is another way to put it, or even just visual blockage, right?
And I think other people would say visual interest.
Okay, all right, so
Yeah, so I
Brian-
think that's
I think
not,
there's original design intent to be able to see across and up and down the mall. And I think that's important.
Okay.
Yeah, one of the things I try to be careful about or thoughtful about is we've gotten, how many emails have we gotten? 15 maybe?
a good number.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I mean, compared to a lot of things that I've seen, I wouldn't consider this like an overwhelming sort of, and I also think that folks really haven't had a chance to digest fully what's there. I think a lot of things Councilor Oshrin pointed out, I think are good points. There are some philosophical, to use a perhaps overused and even irrelevant term, differences about things. And so I wonder, Mayor, I don't know what you think about this. Would it be worth asking Councilor Oshrin to sit down with the BAR and have some more fulsome conversations about the philosophical piece about this? My sort of my sort of default to this is to kind of trust the process. The BIR did this work. These are the recommendations. I'm going to have a very difficult time sort of picking out which pieces of this that I think are not important or should be changed. So that's just sort of where I stand. I'm not prepared to vote on this tonight.
Yeah, I think
It's
if
the
we
first
do,
of 2 readings.
yeah, I think if we have anything, it should be a work session and not one of us doing it.
I've got actually one more question. What is there a cost to doing an appeals process?
So a administrative COA is $100. And then once you have that, and if you don't change something, then it sort of runs with your cafe. We haven't done one in a while. To appeal is, it's a $125 fee. Or if someone says, well, I just want to go straight to the BAR, that's a $125 fee for a regular review. So I just would caution that, going to the BAR, their charge in the ordinance is fairly clear. So I think, you could ask the BAR to explain things and discuss things, but I'd be hesitant to ask the BAR to compromise on what the ordinance instructs it to do. I just make sure we're clear on that. And I appreciate everything you're saying. I do. But the thing is, the BAR is charged with viewing things through this lens. You all are able to look at several other lenses. And in fact, in appeals, you're allowed to consider things BAR doesn't necessarily have the purview to look at. So I just want to, when we have the discussion with the BAR, I think it would be helpful, again, because we're going to have some things coming along that we need to understand the process on. But I think that if there are things that you all feel don't belong in these guidelines, then you all should, use what you have available to make the consideration to make the changes. The BAR's not going to go and throw a tantrum.
Michael?
Well, I guess I would say where I currently land in terms of process, just for myself, would be, and I appreciate the discussion and debate, because I think it's absolutely true that anything with historic preservation, there are trade-offs. It inherently slows things down to some extent. And obviously, across the country, it's been weaponized to prevent any change historically. Again, like I said before, to me, the downtown mall was designed by an architect of national and to some extent international significance. There was a specific design that people across the country have come here to study and replicate, including Burlington, Vermont. We visited Champaign-Urbana, a town that tried to replicate a pedestrian downtown mall and failed. You can count on your fingers how many are still left in the United States that have been successful. So to me, that is an example of something that warrants caution. Not no change, but caution. And my mind just goes to the worst case scenarios of, again, we've had corporate chains on the downtown mall in the past, like Five Guys Sweetgreens. If they have a cafe space, they have standardized logos, designs, colors, seating. In my mind, I just go to the worst case scenario. If you get a proliferation of that, you do really have the sense that it is a privatized space owned by corporate businesses. Likewise, Carytown Tobacco is a wonderful business, but there are other locations across the state where their standardized design is flashing lights that say CBD, Kratom, along with permanent banners that never go away, advertising what's sold there. To me, it's worth having caution just to not allow that. And if all these things were outright bans, I would be uncomfortable with it. But the fact that it can still be appealed not only to the BAR, but also to City Council as this final decision maker. If someone says, I have this really creative idea that flows outside the guidelines, but we think would be a great community benefit, it's always City Council available, and that adds some time, but to me, the cost and time of that is not prohibitive to stop it, but it is a trade-off in terms of a little bit more caution on what happens. So, and where I'm at, I feel comfortable passing it, and like, if there are specific things that council, a majority agrees we want to see change, even if we pass this, that can be introduced in any future time. But again, where I land is particularly because these aren't bans, they're guidelines that can always be appealed to City Council. I am comfortable with it, and again, philosophically, that's just where I come down on I think, the value of guidelines that are a little bit more cautious.
And just so there's no doubt after this discussion tonight, there are currently on the mall places where they've gone outside of their leased space and created artificial hedges using plants and planters. Those are the zoning violations. When spring comes, a lot happened. COVID changed a lot. There's been a lot of looseness on enforcement of things. I think with the new zoning ordinance saying, well, what's going to change, not change, but come March 1st, what is a zoning violation, my understanding is zoning will be enforcing those. So if someone says, you're making me take my planters that are out on the mall, that is not the BAR. I mean, the BAR does not want to see those. I mean, they would prefer they're not there, but those would be removed as a function of zoning. So I just make sure people aren't conflating the two.
I think we understand that.
Yeah. Lloyd, did you have any final comments on this?
My first comment is that I have always said I am not an architect. I don't have the ability to see things that aren't there, which I don't mean to be disparaging. I mean it to be a statement of architects have skills that I don't have. And so I respect the Board of Architectural Review's expertise in that regard. The sort of philosophical aspects of how much regulation is too much regulation is something that, I said at the beginning, I appreciated Natalie's efforts because she really identified an awful lot of the questions that I had that come down to, is this too much? And I would like to have the opportunity to think about what we heard tonight, and in particular the answers to the specific issues that Natalie raised, to see whether there are things there that I think we want to deviate from the BAR, or we don't, or we want to keep the BAR's recommendations. As I said, I appreciate their expertise and their recommendations, and I want to honor them without abdicating, and I haven't quite figured out how I would come out or all that, but as long as we're not deciding it tonight, I'm good.
Okay. So this is, even though I think it says we're voting tonight, it's a first.
Defer.
It's a resolution.
Yeah, so we don't need
It's not an ordinance.
Right.
So we could vote on it tonight.
We could, or we
okay.
could defer and
Okay.
continue having discussions
Yeah.
about.
And the idea was to get this to the BAR. We had a timeline of like, all right, I want to get it to the council so that they have a couple meetings to discuss it, just so that by beginning of the year, we have everything in place and no one's
Yeah.
going, oh my gosh, what happened?
Right.
But,
No, we'll get
Yeah.
it by next meeting.
but again,
Right.
that the key thing, and it's in the report, not necessarily in the guidelines, pretty much what's out there now, except for some barrels and some planters and some rope lights on railings, is staying.
So my question to you is, are you sure you can have this decided on by the next meeting? Because I would ask that you consider deferring it a little bit longer.
So I think that,
Why is that?
Because if you all have to come to an agreement on what the resolution needs to say, you need to figure that out and give that back to staff so that it can be prepared all over again.
Okay. Well,
I don't
Yeah.
think that we can do that in 2 weeks.
Not
If
next-
I'm
Can we do it
processing
before?
what I just heard.
yeah, so,
we can try, and if we don't quite make it, we'll do it to the next one, but we'll definitely have it by the end of the year.
but now if you have additional questions, I would recommend that you give it to them so that they can try to answer it. And we can read them publicly, but gives them
Yeah,
a chance
of course.
to,
I do think it might be worth you just sitting down. Some of this might be just a good
Just
conversation.
as a note, the BAR meets tomorrow night. We would love anyone to join us.
That'd be interesting.
I think it'd be great. I mean, I think, there's a lot of good ideas here.
And I would also just really quickly note that the members of the public that did attend the BAR meeting were in support of these revisions. We didn't have anyone come that spoke against them or anything. I think I would love to see more people come out to BAR meetings, because I think if we had had that conversation with the public, that would have helped possibly on these revisions.
And
I might have made a determination that we weren't ready.
I think this was great. No,
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that. I think this has been absolutely worthwhile. I mean, short of us like setting up camp with the BAR, how else was this going to happen? you
Well,
know?
and I always like to let people plug their meeting. Can you let everyone know where and when tomorrow?
Sure. So it's, I think officially it starts at 5:30. It's City Space, so right next
Great,
door.
thank you.
Yeah, we used to be in this room, but we don't like it, so. Yeah,
That's
tomorrow.
Is it the paneling you don't
When I
like?
started on the
it's-
BAR, we were in here, and then COVID hit.
I
so.
feel like I'm back in 1972.
70, yes, definitely get that
Suburban
feel.
Well, there's that historical preservation.
Yeah, I know.
You know, I thought the conversation was good.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, thank
I
you
do
for
think
coming
it's
out.
just the nature of this sort of thing that you're not going to, people are not going to see eye to eye about this.
It's a public space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Thank you, gentlemen,
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank
and-
you.
and-
Mayor.
And staff.
So we're carrying this till,
We're going to try, in 2 weeks. If not, we still have another meeting this year before we can.
Yeah, and the goal was, the code for cafe spaces says that the city can't change the ordinance 30 days, or it has to be, no less than 30 days prior to the lease date or whatever. But I realize this isn't an ordinance, but I felt like in fairness, to the businesses, I was using that as sort of the guideline. So, I mean, even if you all said in, second meeting in January, you decide. I mean, I don't want to push it, but, yes.
we need a
next-
deadline.
Yeah, next
we
week
wanna-
is.
we want to
that's-
get this over with.
I'm not gonna-
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll
So
be
the-
busy.
Appreciate it.
the-
Natalie, thank you for your help.
Yeah, thank you.
The
Thank
next
you very
item on
much.
the agenda is community, last time for community matters. Anyone in the audience? Yes?
Sorry, I'll be really quick, but it's especially while the people of BAR are still here, and also because I think this might become an issue for you guys eventually. There is something weird going on with the narrative around the Violet Crown. I don't know what it is. I've used all of the publicly available information that I have been able to find. Someone is trying to get the idea out there that the Violet Crown is going to have to close no matter what. They maybe are trying to make it seem like this is some decision by the new management, Elevate Entertainment. I have spoken to the people there. Management has informed me that even upper management of Elevate Entertainment has no such plans. Somebody is trying to get this idea out there, I think, to try to extract regulatory changes that might cause some kind of future deal to happen. It's weird. Do not make any regulatory changes until you have information from the actual people at Violet Crown, because it's odd. And I've like started feeling like there's a conspiracy happening. I don't know. I feel like I'm going crazy. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe you're not.
Yeah. Anyone else like to speak? Being no other actions, we stand adjourned. Thank you.